Hey, Danielle Walker here. I'd love for you to check out my online boutique, Lux Lion. My mission for Lux Lion is to showcase innovative African designers and sustainable, mission driven brands. To do that, I bring you stunningly beautiful handcrafted jewelry and accessories from some of my absolute favorite places on earth. Small batch wholesale for storefronts is also available. Join me in celebrating African artistry and shop now at luxlion.us. Use promo code FREEDOM for an additional 10% off your purchase. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to For the Love of Freedom. Today is Wednesday, November 5th. It's a few minutes after 10 a.m. Central, and I am coming to you live on Voice of the People USA TV and radio network, on Rumble, X, YouTube, and Facebook. Wherever you're watching or listening, please like it, share it, leave us comments. Just a reminder, you can always catch the show on the audio only platforms the day after the live interview, like Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Well, I'm your host, Danielle Walker, and on this show, we meet people who have rejected the status quo, who've broken with convention, have broken with the belief that the TV tells them the truth. And each of my guests, in their own way, are working to bring freedom to the world. Let me bring on my guest today. Welcome. Joining me today is returning guest and a dear brother in Christ, Professor David Clements. You all know that he's done so much work to advance the cause of fair elections and the freedom of the J6 prisoners, and much more than that. We owe him and his wife, Erin, a great debt of gratitude for their work and their tremendous sacrifice. And his work now, through his commentary on the professor's record on his Substack, has become something that I absolutely crave and that I look forward to watching every single Sunday. Welcome back to the show, Professor.
Hey, Danielle, it's good to be with you.
Oh, it's so good to have you. Well, I've been listening to your commentaries, and the way that you have been fluidly speaking to the physical facts and the spiritual realities of issues sparks something. And simultaneously, I've also been reading, well, maybe not simultaneously, but in the same space, I've been reading David and Tim Barton's book, The American Story, and just talking about the founding of the country. And so I guess some combination of all of that made me want to have a discussion with you on kind of integrating your faith into your whole life, and what does that look like, particularly in the world of politics. And so I titled this episode today, Pursuing Authenticity, Wholeness, and Truth in the Midst of War, because I think having that singular self is something that we strive for, but it doesn't necessarily come naturally or easily to all of us. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I'm looking forward to where the Lord takes it.
Oh, let's get started. I can't wait.
Yeah. Well, maybe a little other background. I'd been praying recently that the Lord would help me to understand what the kingdom realm is. Because you see throughout the Gospels, he's preaching the good news of the gospel of the kingdom. But I'm like, well, what is the kingdom? And there's descriptions of the kingdom. But anyway, we had on the State of Freedom last week, Pastor Cheon from California. He's running for governor. And he just made it so simple. He broke it down and said, well, the kingdom is the king's dominion. It's everywhere that Jesus reigns. And so with that, let me start with two scriptures this morning. The first is Matthew chapter 10 and verse 7. And it says, heaven's kingdom realm is accessible, close enough to touch. And then the other scripture is Matthew chapter 18, verses 3-4. And it says, learn this well. Unless you dramatically change your way of thinking and become teachable and learn about heaven's kingdom realm with the wide-eyed wonder of a child, you will never be able to enter in. Whoever continually humbles himself to become like this gentle child is the greatest one in heaven's kingdom realm. And I love those scriptures. And as you think about that and just the gentleness of that moment that Jesus was having with that child. And then I think about, what does that look like in our lives, right? We've spent so much of the last 5 years at war. And maybe I'll start there. How have you, if you have been able to, What does it look like to be reclaiming your childlikeness in the midst of such
Mhm.
difficult and ever changing circumstances?
Wow. Well, big question, because first thing that I think about is where I fail, you know. And so childlikeness in many respects is seen as a liability in the natural.
Yeah.
It requires a level of vulnerability. And I struggle with that. In fact, before I got on the show, there are times where I'll comment or respond to my critics in social media, and they're mean. They're just so mean. And at the same time, I've had people say, "David, you're really, oh wow, you're so smart, and you've got," and they'll say really nice things. And there's almost like this built-in disappointment that if I resort to a trollish response, that I can see my spiritual betters going, "Oh, David, what a waste of, you shouldn't do that, or you shouldn't have said what you said the way that you said it." And so I mean, I kind of have this humor side where I'm thinking, well, isn't also being childlike? Don't I get to do the negative aspects of,
Right.
of being a child?
Can
Because I
I get
remember
the
all kinds
jab
of
in?
things that I said when I was 8 years old. And I guess I try to be strategic about it. On the one hand, I feel like I'm a pretty good writer, and then there's times where in 2 words I can cut something in half, and it is trollish, and it's probably not a good thing. But I wrestle with the idea of this, don't cast your pearls before swine. And so what I'm trying to do is when I engage in a space, since this is an information war,
Yeah.
because I think that's really the prompt in your question is how do you navigate something and retain authenticity, vulnerability? How do you retain whatever it is that makes you you? And instead of like this construct of I need to appear to be the professor, or I need to appear to be this. Um, so yeah, that's what I mean by it's a really big question. Because there are times where I don't feel brilliant. There's times where I don't feel nice. There's times that I don't feel, and I don't want to pretend either. And I
Yeah.
don't know if the
Yeah.
scriptures command that I pretend that I feel anything other than I do. I mean, there are resources that the Bible says you better, you know, think and get through this problem because it's not healthy to stay in
Yeah.
an immature place. But um, so I try to figure out whether someone, if their criticisms are legitimate, I am interested, and I want to see if it's in good faith, and especially when I speak about spiritual matters, like you basically do open yourself up to correction.
Yeah.
And so I really do care deeply about what my spiritual peers think about something that I might put out there that has some impact on what the public might think of the kingdom.
Yeah.
But oftentimes, I hope I don't sound like some proud, arrogant prick about this, but oftentimes what I see are Pharisees and the spirit of religion. And so I'll put out a article or a topic that's kingdom related, and it's 15 minutes long. And then almost immediately there is a Pharisaical person that will just emerge, and he'll start arguing the silence on what I didn't talk about. So I'm being condemned by my silence, and it's like, well, I'm not. That wasn't my purpose in
Yeah.
this article or in this. Or they will actually end up kind of barfing out their own internal trauma or concerns about something that they're wrestling with, and there's a level of projection. And I think there's a place to where you do engage up to a point, but at some point it's like, okay, oh, this person's just angry. Oh, this
Yeah.
person doesn't like that their theology is threatened. This person doesn't like that this might mean that there are spiritual mysteries at work that are far greater than their comprehension, and they don't like that. And so the reason why I bring this up is that a byproduct of my writing is that I there is a deep level of submission, a childlike submission of like, all right, Lord, what do you want to talk about?
Mhm.
What problem do you want me to wrestle with? And that makes you vulnerable because sometimes I will talk about things that I don't fully understand, and I don't have, and I'm in many respects I'm being introduced to a topic, yet I feel like the Holy Spirit's saying, I want you to talk about this. And so, when you do weekly articles or weekly videos, you've got basically 3 days to figure out something. Day one for me is just listening intently.
Yeah.
And then day two is writing something down. And day three is holy smokes. There's so many things that I need to do to polish this. And it's very prayer filled in the sense that when you release it to the world, you're like, I could be wrong about
Yeah.
so much that I'm talking about. So Lord, I mean, I pray that hearts and minds won't be taken off a Christ-centered trajectory by virtue of something that I'm writing, because that's certainly not what I want. It's the last thing that I want. Um, but back to what you're asking, like this, there is a childlike quality of I am being led by the hand, and I'm asking for instruction from my Father. Um, and that's hard to do if you think you've got it all figured out, because at that point you're
Yeah.
really just producing the stuff that you want to write about,
Yeah.
and that's not really hasn't been my process, at least on this iteration of the professor's record. Almost every Sunday when I put out an article or video, there's like automatic relief, and then there's dread of I'm going to get feedback really quickly on whether
Yeah.
this resonates, and then almost a panic of I've got to do something almost immediately. I got to come up with something now to write for next week. So there's not really this well thought out plan. Um, it's submission.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's something that I've struggled with myself, and it's something that I feel like I've gone through a similar process as you. I get the experience. I have a daily devotional blog that I've been doing for a couple years,
Mm.
and the beginning of that was so difficult because I was just like hand wringing and like, Lord, am I really hearing from you? Am I putting out the right thing? And then over time, I guess I got to a place where I was like, Lord, if this isn't from you, if this isn't what you're exactly saying, like, could you cover my mess? Just
Oh, I've been there. I've had so many speaking events where I mean, I'll openly pray that if there's something that I'm saying that's not from you, uh, have these folks tune it out. And that's
yeah,
a really weird prayer. Like, I don't, there's certain words that you probably do want to fall to the wayside if it's not from him. Um, and that's the other thing that's beautiful about our God is that he truly is the originator of all things that are worthy to think about. And
yeah,
so if you can empty yourself out and be a conduit for that, um, you also are kind of a bystander. I mean, a lot of people think in terms of an author or director or someone that's producing creative material, like it's your authorship. And what I find is that the more that I feel like I'm tapping into something that's not me, all you're doing is redirecting. Um, you're using your temple
yeah,
as a conduit for God, and if you do it right, and there's always going to be elements of blindness that there's problems that you don't see, and also sometimes you'll stumble on something that's really really important, and you don't even know how important it is in the moment, um, which is kind of cool because someone will say, "I had you." What you said, did you have any idea that it had a bearing on what this happened on this date and this? And I had no clue. But it makes me look like I'm really smart. And it's like, no. And then you look at it, it's like, all right, well, that's to me, that's an evidence or fruit of the spirit of you are speaking about something that is touching on maybe 100 different issues, and you have no clue that what you're talking about um, has kind of meat on the bones. And right now, what I'm wrestling with for this week is this larger conversation um, about Tucker Carlson and his interview with Nick Fuentes, and I can't tell you how much it grieves. It just grieves me to see what I'm seeing, and it may not be for the reasons that other people are grieved. That I just see the spirit of condemnation, the spirit of
Mm,
religion at work, and I think the spirit of condemnation in religion is just it's so ugly to behold.
yeah.
And you've got this. You can see the psyop emerging before people's eyes right now because of the election that took place yesterday, which is you'll have the Mark Levins of the world, the Ben Shapiro's, saying, "Did you see the results? This is what happens when you platform anti-Semitic. This is what happens when you platform in court. People are so dangerous with the rhetoric. We get Mondami." And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
that's not true. Um, and then you'll have Laura Loomer, same page in the playbook. Do you see what's going on here now? I warned you about this Islamic, bent in our politics, and because we've ignored this, the GOP lost all of its races. And then you'll have the Pressler Turning Point faction, which is spectacularly failing if you're just looking at results.
Yeah.
And then there's the browbeating. Guys, we didn't do turnout. And I'm sitting there going, all of you are wrong for different reasons, but it's the same central problem, which is that you're drawing conclusions from what you're seeing in the cultural discourse without paying attention to what the data says.
Yeah.
And the data is garbage. That's the whole point of having your
Yeah.
election subverted, is that you don't even know what you're looking at because it's being altered in microseconds. And so while it might serve your narrative purpose to make this about Tucker Carlson and woe are the Republicans because you're going to lose every election because of what Tucker Carlson just did with Nick Fuentes. It's so sloppy, it's so superficial,
Yeah.
and it has no bearing on the one thing that we know for a fact that has led to gross election defeats, which is rigged machines, rigged software, early voting, the use of
Mhm.
mail-in ballots, and notice how Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro, Laura Loomer,
Can't
Jack
say it.
Posobiec, none of them talk about it. None of
Mm-mm.
them talk about it, and that's what's so perverse, and that's what's so heartbreaking. And I watched that interview very closely, and I really like the new version of Tucker Carlson. I'm just going to say
Yeah.
I think he is risking so much because he knows for a fact he would get such a giant pat on the back if he did this kind of if he just joined the war machine, because you've got repurposed neoconservatives in the Mark Levins, in the Ben Shapiro. There's a huge vacuum that's emerged with the assassination of Charlie Kirk,
Yeah.
and there's a version of Tucker that would be welcomed in that organization if he would mind his P's and Q's, and he's not. And so I see that, and I'm like, you know what he did? He dared to have a conversation with a guy that does say horrible things. I mean, let's not make excuses.
Yeah.
He's kind of a court jester in a way, and I'm talking about Nick Fuentes. And it seems like there's one speed if you're in the Loomer camp, the Posobiec camp, the Levin camp, which is condemn, condemn, condemn. Make sure that you're on the right side of the issue, and the safest thing to do is just condemn. And you'll have people that I even like Eric Metaxas, telling Tucker Carlson that you need to repent. And that's where it's difficult for me because I really like Eric, and I'm like, no, I don't think he does. Um, you're looking at a guy where Nick Fuentes personally attacked Tucker's wife, personally attacked his children, has said terrible things, and Tucker, wearing those wounds, actually invited him to talk. So that's very, very Christ-like.
Yeah.
To go into a place and say, "Okay, I'm going to put aside the personal attacks and have a conversation with you." And then second, he recognizes that whether or not you like what Nick Fuentes has to say, this isn't about platforming him. It's about recognizing that he's got greater influence with young men under the age of 30.
Yeah, he sure
And if
does.
you're serious about bringing someone your way, if you think there are gross errors in thinking, you engage it now.
Yeah.
Um, and then the third thing is that there's this psyop to say that Tucker is creating or furthering a monster in having interviews with Nick Fuentes. And I think people need to look at the true laboratory, which is not that Tucker interviewed him. The laboratory is DEI, and Nick Fuentes is the byproduct of 2 decades worth of Marxist ideology in our schools, telling young white men that there's something wrong with you
Yeah.
based on 2 things you can't control, which is your gender, right? And your race. You can't control that. And so what's the outlet for that? You end up creating the inevitability of a Nick Fuentes saying, I'm like a demon. I mean, you have demonized me,
Yeah.
and now I'm here." And even when he's not what they say, you'll have like an ex post, and this really pissed me off, from Dinesh D'Souza. I mean, this really makes me angry, that he started calling Nick a pansy because he actually isn't. If he was a real man, he would do what Hitler does, and I'm paraphrasing.
What?
So, like, you can see the creation of the monster of, like,
Yeah.
we're going to call you a coward, but if you were a real man, you would actually act like your hero, so to speak. And I'm sitting there going, do you not see that you are a far greater creator of divisiveness, and either the way I look at it is, either Dinesh thinks that he's right about Nick, or, by God, I'm going to keep accusing and condemning this man till I am right about Nick, because he's going to end up becoming the monster that we really fear. And then the last thing is the danger in looking at what someone says versus what they've done. And when you call someone that says loathsome things like Nick a Nazi, okay, you can do that. That's fine. But when you say he's like the next Hitler, or that Tucker is, the face of the Hitler Youth,
Oh gosh.
um, and you don't look at the actual um, human cost of what Hitler did or what Stalin did, and you equate the two, what a sloppy way of arguing.
Yeah.
So I actually think that Tucker took the harder path, which was the Christian path, um, to pursue, because Christ doesn't condemn; he pursues, and at some point you can be given over to a
Yeah.
hard heart. We certainly see that. But what if Nick Fuentes is Saul?
Yeah.
What if? What if this guy, who's the persecutor of the Jews, just like Saul was the persecutor of the Christians, what if Christ truly gets a hold of him? Because I don't want to question whether Nick Fuentes is a Christian. I think he's a cultural Christian
Yeah.
by what he says. But what I don't see is a whole lot of peace, love, virtuous words, um, from him. So I certainly don't see the fruit of the Spirit. But at the same time, I also see a person who's got a mind and horses at work that put me to shame. I mean, don't think I would fare well in a debate with someone who's got that kind of ability. But I there's a sadness because I'm sitting there going, wow, all of that ability. And if we could just get your heart in line with God's heart and how to see people and to love the unlovable and to forgive. And I actually see that in Tucker, this evolution of someone that's willing to forgive and love and not join the mob. And so I'm actually quite impressed with this version of Tucker.
Well, I haven't watched the interview yet, but I'll have to watch it before your commentary comes out on Sunday. But there's a couple threads that I'd like to pick up on there. One is the way that you talk about their casting, like the Eric Metaxas, Dinesh D'Souza casting of Nick Fuentes, reminds me of when I was working in Africa a lot. There was this new young man on the scene in South Africa, Julius Malema. Well, they, the establishment, instead of bringing him in and encouraging him or teaching him um, in ways that would be, beneficial to society, they cast him aside, and now we saw what we saw in South Africa, that President Trump addressed earlier this year, the complete murder, the annihilation of the white South African farmer, can be directly correlated to the way that they allowed Malema to be the fringe that they called him. Or, he may have started out as a fringe. I'm not saying he started out as a good guy with good ideas, but he certainly started out a lot smaller of a problem than he became. And so I
Yeah.
think that parallel is really striking to me.
No, I think you're spot on. And look, it to the degree that Nick Fuentes allows the voices of the establishment to radicalize him. In some ways, there's a self-fulfilling prophecy that because what you're going to find is that the hardened, angry, less thoughtful elements of Nick's following are going to be the elements that embrace him and affirm him no matter what. And
Yeah.
they'll affirm the ugliness. And so he's getting feedback from all kinds of sources. And what I love about the conversation is it forced him to experience feedback from people that aren't in his camp. And I think that's
Mm.
vital feedback. Um, and then the other thing is there's we all wrestle, I think, if we're honest in our spiritual walk, with the healthy version of ourselves and the unhealthy version. We all have that.
Yeah.
And when you see someone who's soulish, and I think Nick Fuentes is very soulish. I don't see him as a spiritual guy. I think he's someone who has a mind that's amazing. He's got a will that's amazing, and and his emotions. You could say, well, that's debatable because of the rudder that he uses, the tongue.
Yeah.
Um, but he is someone who's mastered his mind, will, and emotions, and you could tell he's very calculated. Um, so when he joked about Stalin being a hero, um, you could see again the motives of all of the accusers, which is Tucker's silence means that he tacitly endorsed what Nick said. He didn't challenge him. And then you're like, well, Tucker's got 30 years of tape where he's been a fierce critic of Stalin. So if you know him, like, you just know that's
Yeah.
BS. I saw Tucker's reaction as one of puzzlement, which is like, are you just being a troll? I don't know. And I think he even said in a later podcast that his regret is that he didn't follow up on that. But as someone who I think is intelligent, and I think I'm intelligent, I'm sitting there going, I'd be puzzled too. It's like, are you just doing this because you know that this is going to lead to a billion clicks later?
Yeah.
And so there is a tactic at play where it's so easy for you to make him what you need him to be, which is, I'm going to take him literally. That's a monstrous thing to say. You know, roll the tape, chop up the clips.
Mhm.
We've got them. We've got them. And I just think that Nick knows exactly what's going to happen with respect to that statement. And he's actually playing people. I still think it's foolish to say what he did.
Yeah.
Um, and so, on the one hand, I'm reminded of my favorite comedian, Norm Macdonald, who passed away. He used to have these outlandish jokes about Hitler, and he would, in deadpan fashion, say, "Oh, he was a good guy," and it's absurd that he's saying
Right.
it, and he doesn't think he's a good guy, but just the idea of saying that, and it wasn't just Hitler; it was almost every atrocious world figure. He would, he'd do a comedic bit, and then when he's getting done, he just kind of hits you with this gut punch of, he's a good guy. And the crowd would laugh at the incredulity of the statement.
Yeah.
And so I can't tell if there's a part of that where Nick is going there, but when you realize you're in a highly weaponized environment where everyone's scrutinizing those things, one of the things that I've learned as a public figure is that, um, go ahead and joke, but you're doing so at great peril. Like,
Yeah.
the things that you can say in an intimate situation, and even talking about scriptural beliefs. If you're not super careful, you're going to invite every manner of criticism.
Yeah. Definitely. Do you want to get into at all? I wasn't planning to go there, but we can if you want to. Kind of something that you touched on with the Laura Loomer, Dinesh D'Souza faction. I saw that Roseanne had an interview with Dinesh D'Souza where they talked about Tucker, and kind of him casting him as being
Mhm.
anti-Semitic. I've just been kind of honestly scratching my head a little bit with all of this because I just feel like in some ways it's so bizarre that the conversation has come to be what it is, where
Mm.
there's this idea that Israel, like, if you criticize the Israeli government in any way, you are all of a sudden anti-Semitic. But if and then there is a whole crowd of people who are literally blaming everything on the Jews, which I find to be baffling.
Mhm.
And so many of these, and then there's this replacement theory group
Mhm.
of people who are all of these people are claiming to be part of the truth movement in some way. Now, some of them I would give entrance to, and others I would say you're not quite there. But how are you making sense of all this? And I I don't know. In some ways, it reminds me of that scripture. I don't know if it's in Revelation where the Bible talks about they're going to be all of the nations surround Jerusalem. I'm like, maybe it's just rhetorical. I mean, I'm not saying it wouldn't be
Mhm.
physical at some point, but rhetorically, all of the nations are surrounding Jerusalem right now.
Yeah. Well, I think first the thing that I would acknowledge is that why it's so difficult is that up until this week, I would probably give a like on 99% of the stuff that Dinesh posts.
Yeah.
That's it's weird, and I know that I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm named after David for a reason, and I love the people of Israel. Like, I don't have this, like, my theology treats Israel as a very special thing because God treats them as a special thing. And you can start
Yeah.
getting into the arguments on replacement theology. I'm aware of them. Um, I look at God's covenant with Israel as just that. It's God's covenant with Israel. And I don't see any scriptural reason to see that a covenant was replaced as opposed to having another covenant running in parallel. Um, and so I see Romans and I see the passages of a temporary hardening, and that the Gentiles, I think the way that we live out our faith should be an attractive aroma for, um, Jews to see Christ in a way that's lovely and beautiful. And
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a huge revival for the Jewish people. And so, because I love image bearers of God, I'm not going to vilify and single out a people group. And I think that's what Nick has chosen to do, which is unfortunate. But I counted, there was at least 4 times where Tucker challenged Nick on, why do you do that? Why can't we just use universal principles based on this idea that each individual has to be judged by who he is, what
Yeah.
he has done, as opposed to ascribing kind of this villainous motif to an entire nation. And so, I saw someone who was gently correcting or trying to bring Nick his way, and so that's one of the reasons why I don't think it's fair to say the platforming alone. This wasn't about a conversation. This was about legitimizing Nick Fuentes. Like, no, you've got what 1.3 million Jewish voters in the country. I've read that. I don't know if it's absolutely correct, but I've read that. And Nick Fuentes's following alone on X is over 1 million. I think that's probably a conversation you want to have if you actually care about Jewish people or the people of Israel, to see if there is a way to modify and change Nick Fuentes' perceptions on things. And you do that
Yeah.
in the open, and you do it now before it's too late. Um, the other thing is Roseanne. Um, I think she's Jewish,
Hmm.
and I like Roseanne.
Yeah.
And
She's so
but
funny.
I think that the way that Jewish people react to um, Tucker's comments, there is kind of an innate, intuitive mechanism that says, you know something, because my identity is that of a Jew, um, and they're so well acquainted with their own story of being persecuted, and knowing that you kind of are this unique group of people, and all we know is survival. And so they're kind of on high alert. The survival instinct gets triggered. And I don't know if that's necessarily a rational thing. I think it's just part of um, living in a culture that's, surrounded literally by enemies that don't
Yeah.
believe you have a right to exist. And so when I look at Roseanne inviting Dinesh, it's like this serves the purposes of kind of this zero sum game of, we are going to eradicate our enemies because our enemies have promised to eradicate us. And that to me is a very, very Jewish way of thinking. Um, it comes out in Laura Loomer's discussion. There's not a whole lot of discussion on the idea of forgiveness. And yet we're told by Christ that if you don't forgive, I'm not going to forgive you,
Yeah.
which means that my approach to a Muslim is very different than Laura Loomer's, or a lot of people of the Jewish faith. There is kind of this zero sum, them or us. They've kind of made their blood oaths. We've got our tribes, and God is going to vindicate us. And yet I look at the scriptures, and I'm sitting there going, I have a desire for the Muslim to find Jesus. I want them to have eternal life. I don't want to condemn even the worst extremist Muslim, in the sense that I want them to meet Jesus. Likewise, I want my Jewish brothers to meet Jesus. And so, it takes you out of this place of, I'm going to go on your show, Roseanne, and condemn Tucker. Let's condemn him together, because Christ isn't, he's not built that way. He's someone who restores you. He's always pursuing you to restore you. And restoration is found in him. So it's a very different conversation. So when I see a post from Laura Loomer where she's like, "I will never forgive so and so," I wince, because I'm sitting there going, "Oh, you don't understand, at least according to my faith,
Yeah.
that you're foreclosing the opportunity for God to forgive you." And what it does is it creates a great deal of pressure for you to always be right, and pride can't help but show up on the scene. And so the way that you maneuver and talk with people, you have to win the argument. You have to be right. And who needs that pressure? I want
Gosh.
to be right with God. Um, but there is a soft heartedness that comes with walking like Christ, which is, one of the things I just don't see from conservatives, patriots, lots of different faith walks is the practice of praying for your enemies. And it's really, really hard to hate someone that you're praying for. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're sincere in praying for their salvation, it changes the character of how you see them. You see them as someone like, I, I pray that God uses you in such a spectacular way that you'll end up being the greatest champion for the gospel. And I don't see that in what Dinesh is putting out there. And unfortunately, I don't see it with what Eric Metaxas has put out there. I think he has kind of courted and adopted many of the turning point type talking points about Tucker. And I'll give you a perfect example. When Tucker spoke at the memorial service in Phoenix, he was speaking right from the pages of the Gospels um, about Christ, and the kind of the Israeli element said, "This is so anti-Semitic, so anti-Semitic," and it actually reminds me of 20 some years ago when Mel Gibson put out The Passion. He did an interview that I remember very, very clearly with Diane Sawyer, and they played the clip of Pilate washing his hands, and there's this discussion from the Gospels about a curse being upon the people that were there. And that was taken by the ADL and everyone else as anti Semitism. And Mel Gibson said it's in the pages of the scriptures.
Yeah.
And that didn't stop people from destroying. And I think, um, having been someone who struggled with alcohol and drugs at one point, that um, the upheaval in Mel Gibson's personal life, just a spectator looking in, um, and using alcohol and being pulled over and having all of these um, recorded conversations, um, you could see kind of the turmoil in his mind and soul, that he was being accused of something that you knew wasn't true, that there wasn't an
Yeah.
anti-Semitic bone in that man's body. Yet, if you've ever been drunk, and I have, um, the things that come out of your mouth. So there was a call where he gets pulled over and he asked the arresting officer if they're a Jew, and I was like, "There it is." And I'm sitting there going, he's probably meditating and internalizing the grievous hurt of everyone telling everyone that he hates Jews
Yeah.
because he made the Passion of the Christ. And it takes someone who's actually been in that world and imbibed it, um, that there is a sarcasm, there is a thing that comes out, you're reacting out of hurt, and it's not the real person. It's really not. It's a manifestation of pain. And so Mel Gibson's is someone who was so fundamentally misunderstood, and it's weird that I'm even going here, but I see this as kind of a cyclical template where you had this great film, this great artist, and the mob, the outrage mob, came up and destroyed and derailed an imperfect man's career. Um, and you see him kind of like grasping at like the apology tour on how do I get back into Hollywood and make movies? Have I kissed enough rings? Have I told enough people that I'm sorry? And I see what's going on with Tucker to be very, very similar to that. I don't think for a second that Tucker Carlson's an anti-Semite. I don't think he's platforming anti-Semites. I think he's challenging someone in a way that makes sense. That if you wanted it to be an interview full of condemnation, you wouldn't have had a discussion. It would have been a series of gotcha moments that would have devolved, and people could have cheered him on that way. I think Tucker was doing something that was infinitely harder, which is, I really want to press in on what you think because I don't agree with it on this issue. Now, where do they agree? They agree on foreign policy, which leads me to, I think, the real issue is that people aren't upset that Tucker had a conversation with Nick Fuentes if they're being honest. They're really not. This is about 2028. This is entirely about the Mark Levins, the Ben Shapiros, silently hating Trump, silently hating that he has changed the Republican Party away from the Nikki Haley, let's go to war with everyone.
Yeah.
And we get to reclaim it. We get to wait out the clock. And if you look at the Shapiro position on Trump, Levin, they hated Trump in 2016. And by the time they came around, it was their endorsements were like they were chewing on glass. And even when DeSantis emerged, until he was out, they weren't pro-Trump.
Yeah.
And so it's so laughable that they have reconstituted themselves into like they're the base of MAGA. They were never the base of MAGA, not even close. But what you're seeing are these psyops to see if they can push and pull and cajole and bring people under this reclamation. It's a reclamation project of finally we'll be free of the guy that doesn't want to go to war with everyone. Damn it, he did that nuclear Iran strike and we're kind of forced to praise him, but he's taken away the boogeyman. And that's why Middle East peace is actually possible.
Do you think that's why Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin and others are so angry? I mean, one of the things I've picked up on lately is there's certain people that when you watch them, your blood pressure just rises and rises and rises, and it's like uncontrollable. And you're like,
Yeah.
every time I look at this person, every time this person has something to say, it's from a place of deep anger and it's very accusatory.
Yeah.
Where do you think that's coming from?
It's weird because I'm all these things that I'm talking about, I'm putting to paper. So
Excellent.
they remind me of a mosquito trapped in a glass jar. There's like this like it's irritable. They're irritable. And it also I think your question is spot on, because anyone that tries to get you to do something out of an emotive reaction,
Yeah.
it's not of the Spirit. The Spirit allows you to peacefully reflect. You're receiving counsel, and you're always making a decision out of peace and authority. And they don't allow for that. It is, you need to do this now, and if you don't, you're no better than Tucker. That's sickening. Because I do feel like I'm part of a camp that's really the majority, but I don't know if the majority has quite wrestled with this issue to the degree they can articulate it, which is this: I have a heart for Israel.
Yeah.
I don't hate the Jews. Guess what? I also don't hate Muslims. I don't hate atheists. I don't hate communists. I may hate the ideologies and kind of the demonic perversion that permeates through many of these philosophies, because they are at their core anti-God and anti-Christian. But there's this great paradox in my faith that says that's who you pursue. That's who you go after.
Yeah.
If they're not the lost sheep, who is? Someone that's a slightly different shade of denomination, but still a Christian, and still professes Christ. So Christ's mission field requires me to see these people that Levin and Shapiro can only see as an enemy, and they can see them as an enemy in perpetuity. It's a forever enemy. And that's not the Christian faith. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have wisdom and we shouldn't defend our borders and we don't respond through a just war framework if we're attacked. It doesn't mean that we don't stand up for our allies if necessary, if it serves our national security interests. But I'm always very, very wary. And one of the things that I've noticed with the conversation with a lot of these people, if you actually ask yourself, what is the chief export of a Mark Levin? Like, what is the chief contribution to our discourse? And I'm left with this idea that his chief export is accusation.
Mm.
I don't, same thing with Laura Loomer. She's broken a lot of stories. And at times it serves the interest of MAGA, but in most cases, it is you look at her tweets and it's accusation, 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 accusation. And you can do that. You can, I mean, and she does it well. And I'm not just, I don't want to say that there's not a place for it. I think there are times where you do have to expose the truth. But when everything is an accusation, um, at some point it's like, okay, I'm getting off this train
Yeah.
because
I
it
was
seems like you need me to tell you that you're right all the time. And sometimes I just don't think you're right.
yeah. I was watching, I think this morning, a clip of some Joe Rogan interview, and I can't remember who he was interviewing, but the guy was talking about the fact that one of the core elements of it, or one way to know that you're in a psyop, is that the person, the authority figure or whoever is silencing you. There's no room for disagreement. I mean, of course, COVID is the biggest example of that, but you can see that with some of these smaller wars that are going on online, where you're just like, oh, there's no room for a conversation in this space. There's only room for being exactly aligned with this one mantra. And if you don't agree with that, then you are, and then you can just fill in the blank of
Mhm.
whatever it is you are.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's like, okay, I care about a lot of the discussions and the talking points that are being brought up. I think there is a place for a rigorous theological discussion of replacement theology, or how should we identify enemies? Like, to what degree do we um, engage with the Middle East through our individual capacities as part of the church, which is very different than a government that wields the sword.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, those are all worthwhile discussions because I can already feel like people gaslighting. Oh, so you think this about Muslims. Well, what's going to happen when we have another 9/11? Like, you can already anticipate where your critics are going, and they're not from a place of good faith. So I really want people to understand this, is that you can have a heart for the enemy and not lose sight of the fact that you can wield the sword when necessary. Um, you can, I think, in certain cases, justify foreign aid. I'm, in general, against foreign aid. But if there are legitimate national security interests that we share, I don't want to be obtuse about something, that to realize that it probably is important to have Israel having the ability to protect itself. Like,
Yeah.
that's not a non-starter with me. I think with
Right.
other people, and which is an evolution of my own beliefs. I used to be so hardcore libertarian. It's like, let's do this universal principle. And I think this is one thing that Nick brought up that surprisingly was persuasive, not to the degree that I would ever vilify Jewish people, but he did make the argument that Israel, it's almost impossible to treat them like any other nation because they do have something that's so unique to them, which is there's kind of this vagabond. We were displaced for so long as a nation until we reclaim certain geographic boundaries, that the idea of assimilation for virtually every group other than Israel is very different. So when you come to the U.S., you assimilate and you really take to heart this idea that now I'm an American citizen. Like, my allegiance
Yeah.
is to America. And there is something very different culturally about Israel, because there is this place and this affection and this deep-seated loyalty that even in the evangelical circles that I travel in, that's a carve-out exception that we don't give to any other people group.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think he's pointing out, okay, there are unique circumstances where he's being asked to adopt a universal principle, treat them like everyone else. And he's like, but do we treat them like everyone else? And I think to the degree that he has some truth on his side, it's this. Um, there is an outsized influence of Israeli intelligence aspects that is permeated through um, our governmental framework. APAC is not a good thing, in my
Yeah.
opinion. I don't think we should have people with QR codes that you can scan and you can go ahead and
Hmm.
make your donations, as
Yeah.
Matt Gates pointed out. I don't think that Mossad should have the outsized influence that it does. Um, and it raises larger questions. You think of Charlie Kirk and the timing of his assassination. I think it was just 8 days prior that he asked for a Doge-like audit because he was seeing all kinds of red flags on how money was being spent. And this comes on the heels of him doing several interviews where he questioned the overt censorship of him saying out loud, what the hell happened with the delayed response from IDF
Yeah.
on the
What
October?
was what was the Doge like audit he was looking for?
Basically, they were looking at inlays and outlays, and none of it made sense. It's like, what is going on here? Where's this money
At
coming
Turning
from?
Point?
At Turning Point?
Okay.
Where is this money coming from? Why are we spending as much as we are at this? And it was kind of and interestingly enough, Tyler Bauer, who I think is the number two, as soon as Charlie was assassinated, he didn't take up that last charge from Tucker. I mean, not Tucker, but from Charlie. He swept that under the rug. They're not doing this Doge-like audit that Charlie asked for.
Hmm.
And so when you and I don't think that Charlie saw things the way that I saw them on elections, but I will say this: if you're willing to turn down millions of dollars from either direct Israeli funding or indirect, because it's been largely validated that Netanyahu wanted to support Turning Point through Israeli funding. And there seems to be some merit to the idea that that was rejected because there are strings attached to it. So
Okay.
when I think about money, I don't just think in terms of funding for funding's sake. Where does that funding go? Well, okay, so let's unpack this. You have a ballot chasing operation that people have suggested was over $100 million was poured into this early vote, this ballot chasing that. And I don't want to speculate on the commingling of resources, but there's a big pot. And I know that the messaging out of Turning Point was when it came to election security was in lockstep with the CIA, Mossad, the deep state. The talking points out of Turning Point when it came to securing our elections was as deep state as it gets.
Hmm.
So I'm going to put the question out there. If you care about American policies being favorable to Israel, which they clearly do, AIPAC clearly does, Netanyahu clearly does, and you got QR codes and scanning and a lobby that's unlike anyone else. It's the most powerful lobby in Washington. What is that about? It's really about controlling politicians. It's about controlling how they vote. So let's go upstream. How do you really control how someone votes? By having a say in the infrastructure that we use. And so while I firmly believe that we should say, along with our Israeli brothers and sisters, that you have an existential right to live, to exist, and we're going to affirm you. As an American citizen, I think that my republic also has an existential right to exist free from someone else's monetary influence, propping up a selection-like system.
Yeah.
So this is not me saying that Israel is meddling with our elections. What I'm saying is money talks, money walks. And when you start looking at $100 million budgets on get out the vote campaigns that are largely optics, what you're doing is you're controlling the levers indirectly, directly. And so that's something that's not lost on me, because kind of my North Star through all of this is, okay, I've got opinions on Dinesh D'Souza and Ben Shapiro, Mark Levin, Laura Loomer, Roseanne Barr, all these people. And most of them I like most of the time.
Yeah.
Um, but my litmus test has not changed in 5 years. What have you said about a rigged and stolen election? What have you done to combat a rigged and stolen election? Mark Levin is worthless on what happened with 2020. He could not get away from MAGA quickly enough and gaslight us on getting over it. And he was basically saying this was a great opportunity to now get away from the failed experiment that was Trump. Shame on him. Ben Shapiro's a little bit more complicated because he did have 2,000 mules, but what has he not talked about? The rigged machines and the rigged software. And so there's a
Dinesh
third,
D'Souza, you mean?
yeah. So there's a third rail.
Yeah.
I think he's touched on it a little bit, but there is this element of, I think, the limited hangout and Turning Point, they're okay with the idea that this is really a mail-in ballot problem, and that's it.
Yeah.
Well, if you're the enemy, you're sitting there going, I can live with that. Just
Yeah.
keep the damn machines in place, and we'll still be able to manipulate elections to the degree that we can really determine who's going to be the winner or loser. And that's kind of the only concession that they give is mail-in ballots. So you've got that with Dinesh. He's a little bit harder, but for the most part, most of the other people that we're talking about, absolutely silent, demonstrated zero loyalty to Trump when it mattered in the aftermath of 2020. And like, why in the world would I be led by the nose by any of these people now on this debate? And to be honest, as much as I'm defending Tucker in this interview, one of my biggest objections with Tucker was that he didn't use his platform when it mattered on the re-elections. I remember him gaslighting Sidney Powell and giving her a hard time. I hope he regrets that. I think he probably does. But none of these people that we're talking about, Nick Fuentes included, have really leveraged their platforms to highlight how rigged our elections are as being as important an issue as it truly is. And that's concerning to me.
Yeah.
It really is.
And maybe we can talk about last night's elections or yesterday's elections, because what's amazing to me is because of what you just laid out in large part, because those types of personalities have not spoken up, have not used their platform to talk about the elections. I'm getting texts last night and this morning from people saying, can you believe it? All those Karens in New York voted for a socialist. I'm like, what? That doesn't even make any sense. I mean, I'm sure there were some Karens in New York who voted for a socialist, communist Mondami. But what about all the illegal immigrants who cast ballot, whose names, who somehow cast a ballot, whether physically or it was done on their behalf? Do you want to talk a little bit about how do we even start to have this conversation in a meaningful way whenever every single news outlet is reporting on this election as if it was real?
Well, I mean, welcome to the curse that is my life. I in some ways, I just throw up my hands in exasperation because I've been saying the same thing for so long, which is until you solve the infrastructure problem, you're not serious. The people that talk about get out the vote, if you're not going to address early voting, mail-in ballots, Dominion, ESNS, you're not serious.
Yeah.
And so when you see these videos of people, clearing out the drop boxes and there's no chain of custody and it just looks ugly and unsecure, and you're sitting there going, oh, you're going to give life to the narratives about whether someone's popularity was rooted in an issue that they talked. You really think that our elections are about abortion now? You really think that? You really think it's about welcoming illegal immigrants and Muslims? Because you can see how you use the weakness of the system to justify whatever narratives you want, which is
Absolutely.
Mandami is a referendum on Trump
Come on.
and
That's
what
right.
he's doing on deportation. This is a message to him. And then you see people running with it like, okay, if this happened in New York, watch out in 2026, because there's going to be so they're seeding the narrative to justify what we're
Yeah.
probably going to see, not because it's true, but because that's what they're going to engineer from a standpoint of perception theater. And so you just scratch your head going, okay, I don't know what to do. And in many respects, I don't feel like I need to keep up with the latest iteration of fraud. Yeah, the machines went down in red precincts. Yes, the poll books had glitches. It's like, we've seen this. And so I could report and say, hey, everyone, I'm right. I'm right. I'm right. I'm right again. Here's a different iteration of it. I'm right about Liberty Vote being a scam and
Yeah.
simply a rebrand from Dominion. I can do that. But at the same time, it's like I've produced a documentary that lays it out about as clearly as humanly possible. And I don't know what it's going to take for people to take the resources and the knowledge of all the experts that we've gotten together and compiled this information that we know we're right about the only way you're going to have a secure elections without all the things that I just mentioned. It seems like people are just going to have to be shown and bludgeoned to death. Like, you're going to have to live through the painful consequences of being sheep that adopts superficial talking points, whether it's from Dinesh or Mark Levin or Ben Shapiro or Scott Pressler. You can adopt those superficial talking points and say that, yeah, we lost because our rhetoric on Islam is just wrong, or people shouldn't have been talking about babies as much. You can do that, and you'd be a fool. You'd be an absolute fool. So, and the other thing is I have to kind of gauge my own cynicism and reflect that so much of the discourse is being shaped by bots and algorithms on what you can see and what you don't see. And so I don't have an answer for that. And that's probably what's so frustrating about this is like, David, what do we do? Well, if I'm subject to what Elon allows to be seen and doesn't, I can put out a video now, but it's not going to count for much. It seemed like Netanyahu prevailed upon Elon in the last 2 weeks to highlight a bunch of accounts that I've never seen before on an issue that I think is of secondary importance to the real issue, which is election security. And voices like myself, I'll put out a post on what happened yesterday, and then I'll go over and see what Scott Pressler puts out. And I'm sitting there going, photo op, him walking in the rain door to door for all of like 30 seconds. And I see kind of the celebrity worship of, man, if we just had 1,000 of these guys, if we just had 1,000 more Scott Presslers, I'm going, well, what hope do I have? Because I see what I do. I like my own video and I come back to the screen and it's unliked. I do that 8 times a day. Like, that's the world that I live in, which is gross censorship. So, this gets back to some of the larger topics that I've written about, which is the only way that I see that we will have true, meaningful victory is, Lord willing, that Trump is who I hope and think he is, and that there's got to be a national security solution where you use the massive fraud that we just saw yesterday as part of a larger exposure operation and sting. Let everyone dig themselves into their flawed narratives, and then give the big reveal. I don't know if that's on an emergency broadcast system or some other avenue, but it's really sickening. Because I don't want to be able to just tell people, I told you so. I'm right. But, I revisit a year ago this time. I went on Emerald Robinson's show. I went on several shows. And I said, you can't read into almost anything about who's claiming credit. What I can tell you is that Trump won, and it has nothing to do with Turning Point's effort, has nothing to do with Scott Pressler, has nothing to do with my messaging. It has everything to do with his ability somehow to block Serbian intervention and turn away at an industrial scale mail-in ballots that are fabricated out of thin air. And he did that. That has nothing to do with get out the vote. It has nothing to do with voter registration. It has everything to do with how in the world did you in the cyber world stop the perception that votes were being reported in a way that were favorable to Kamala Harris. And I said that right out the gate. And then you find out that Peter Tickton recently affirmed that. That's exactly what happened. Now, I didn't get like a cable from the president. This is what happened. I just understand the infrastructure. The only way
Right.
that he could have won is if he stopped the two big threat vectors, which is election night reporting, what we see being put out on a website and on a screen. He was able to stop the manipulation of our perception, and they were able to have fans showing up with mail-in ballots and turn them away. There are true interdiction efforts that succeeded this time for Trump. They did not succeed for Carrie Lake. They did not succeed for Sam Brown. They did not succeed for 20 House races in
Right.
California. Did not succeed down the ballot. And so yesterday was kind of a reminder that the infrastructure is alive and well. So what is it about Trump that he had power as the non-president to stop things that probably would require military support?
Yeah.
And so there's this invisible shadow campaign that was at work, or shadow presidency that was at work, I think, during Biden's term. That's a real thing. And it has to be, I'm saying this is, it has to be true. And the reason why I say it has to be true is if it's not true, we're screwed when it
That's
comes
right.
to getting our elections. That's the point I want to get across, is that if Trump doesn't have the ability to lay it all bare through his experts at the NSA, through FISA, through disclosures, we're in big trouble. So one of the things I talked about last week was the idea of a third term. What's the path? Is it possible? And this idea of a disclosure campaign that accompanies the mother of all executive orders, and it has to come out soon. How soon, I don't know, but I would think you'd have to have something before Christmas for people to get their heads around. And to the degree that you don't have it before Christmas, that just tells me that it's going to have to be something that's done through the National Guard. Because if there's not going to be enough time for buy-in for clerks and regular people to be a part of the process, that means you're not relying on them as part of the solution anyway.
Yeah.
And that might be the case too.
David, what do you think? What impact do you think our rigged election system infrastructure has had on the type and quality of candidates? Because as I look at a Winsome Sears, my dad was asking me, why wouldn't Trump endorse her? I was like, well, I mean, she was all over DeSantis. She didn't have anything nice to say about Trump. And what would a Trump endorsement ultimately do for her? But at I guess at the core, it's why, I look at the kind of candidates who are coming out, um, and I just it's like maybe the reason we don't have any awake politicians is because the awake people refuse to run because we look at the infrastructure and say, "What's the freaking point?"
Yeah. I'm going to give a really cynical answer on this, because I actually gave a speech in Iowa, and the Secretary of State was on stage with me when I gave the speech. And this is ES&S territory. And I know for a fact this person has lied to his constituents about whether or not the machines they use can produce cast vote records, all of these vital records that determine one way or the other whether your machines are rigged. They've not produced a single cast vote record to the people of Iowa. And so you've got people that are buying into this idea that in Iowa, we don't have a problem with our elections because Trump won. Everyone's Republican. And you can't prove us wrong because we're not going to give you the records that will put the matter to rest. And so I'll have someone who's running for office, a candidate, young kid. And, he kind of gives me because he knows that I've got a platform and I've got some people, as pressed as my following is, but you can tell he's angling for an endorsement. I want to work with you. I want to talk with you about all of these things. I think they're very important. And I just looked at him do you think that your elections are secure in Iowa? And he hemmed and hawed. And I'm like, I just told him, you lack wisdom. You don't deserve to represent these people as a congressman. And he was shocked. It's like I slapped him in the face. And I'm sitting there going, the whole point of your position is that you're going to legislate and be an extension of the people through policy making. And you don't even have an abiding conviction one way or the other about whether or not the selection process is compromised. Come back to me when you're past hemming and hawing and playing the game, when you become an expert on protecting the voice of your constituents that you want. And so 99.9% of the candidates I meet are like that young man. They just kind of live in this oblivious state of, it could be true, but I don't want to think about it because I just spent $2,000 on yard signs. And wouldn't that suck if I spent that money? And so what I tell them is, like, if you get in, it's because you have shown enough tape to onlookers that you present zero threat to the status quo. That is the only way you're getting in as an elected official. You present zero threat to the status quo. They see you as malleable and they'll push you. Or what's worse is you get in because you're part of some Freemason satanic cabal where a handshake and an agreement behind the scenes gets you exactly where they want you to be. And I really think, you call me a cynic, it's a byproduct of those two things. You don't get in unless they say so, or they're like, this person, we can turn them.
Yeah.
And anyone who's deluded themselves into thinking that they're going to play the game and somehow sneak in, and once you get in, you'll demonstrate integrity. It's never happened in the history of politics. It's never happened. And it's one of the most delusional things that I've observed from candidates is that. So that's what I think. So should people run? It kind of begs the question. And I think it's different. I think absolutely run, as long as you understand that your platform in running is to be a truth teller. And so I will never begrudge someone using their platform or running for office to talk about election security and fixing the problem. And then you won't waste anyone's time. You won't waste your time if you lose, because you will. You won't waste your time because you were telling the truth the whole time, and truth is needed. And in the event that you're vindicated because Trump does something that's miraculous, then you'll have built up this season of credibility and tape that you were always worthy of the office. And what you're doing is you're demonstrating you're worthy.
Yeah.
And you're not worthy if you don't want to wrestle with this. If your palm cards and your campaign flyers do not mention getting rid of the rigged machines, I'm not interested in following someone whose consultant said that's kind of a topic that we would advise you to stay away from.
Right.
Get behind me, Satan.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's the truth.
To what extent do you think the secretaries of state control the levers, like have a say in who wins? I think about my state, and I think about the way that the legislature basically bowed to her every whim the last two sessions since she's been in office. And it's remarkable to me.
I think to the degree that you can occupy the lead position of the National Association of Secretaries of State, that you only get that position if you are completely controlled. Well, the predecessor in your state was Kyle Ardoin.
Yeah.
And he held that position. Maggie Toulouse-Oliver in my state held that position. And I think the Secretary of State in Iowa that I was just at holds that position now. And so if you are a deep state incubator for controlling elections, you want to put people in leadership positions where they're kind of setting the tone, the policies are going through them, and they're trickling down. But it really comes down to, what fruit does your Secretary of State have?
Yeah.
And if all she has is letters that look like they've been forged without a letterhead,
Hmm.
uh, giving
And suppression
assurances,
of free speech.
yeah, and that Trump has said it's okay for you to violate the executive order, just use what's there, uh, but you can't confirm that from anyone in the Trump administration. Then people should be livid, and we should make the events that these people speak at uncomfortable. Because what else do we have other than use the First Amendment to tell them that um, you know we've got grievances and
Yeah.
we're bringing them to your attention because the public trust has been broken. And it's so disgusting to see people kind of go back into rehab mode again. It's like, well, we've got Landry in, and I think he's a good guy, and therefore maybe it's not a problem. Or the Heritage Association, they gave us a good rating. It's like, you guys are fools. You're just absolute fools.
At
So
best.
I think at some point, my rule of thumb going back was 2021. I'd give people the benefit of the doubt about elections, and after 2021, it's like, no. Not only can I not give you the benefit of the doubt because you're a custodian of the vote, you should be scrutinized. And frankly, if you're still protecting the machines, you deserve to be tarred and feathered.
Yeah.
That's how egregious their conduct has been. And it's sickening because you want to like these people. But when you catch yourself talking with the good, fine people of Louisiana or New Mexico, where I live, and the way that they answer and address rigged election is, I think I think my Secretary of State's a Christian. I think he's a patriot. I think he's conservative. It's like, just stop
Yeah.
yourself. Like,
Hmm.
listen to what you're saying. It's like, if you don't know who that person is, that tells you that you know who that person is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you sit with some of this stuff? So today we talked about some things that are difficult topics. Some topics have answers, others less so. And even if they have answers, we don't know what their ultimate end's going to be. How do you just sit with that whenever you kind of come to the end of the thought process? And what advice would you have for people who are wrestling with some of these tough topics, to kind of have some rest in the process?
It goes back to, I think, the original line of thinking that we started the show with was kingdom. Um, Ultimately, you have to go back to your faith, and either God is who he says he is or he's not. And if God is all knowing, ever present, all powerful, if God responds to the prayers of his people, if he responds to concepts like repentance, if he in fact laughs at the wicked, laughs at their designs, and I am placed in the kingdom as part of the body of Christ, and I have the mind of Christ, then my posture is one of readiness to do and obey whatever the king tells me to do um, at any moment. And if it's from him, he'll give me the resources. If it's
Yeah.
from him, he'll give me the words. If it's from him, he'll give me the audience. And if it's not, and I don't have those things, then I can probably come to terms with either it's not for him or he needs me to produce a faith in the waiting while
Mm.
he works through other people so you don't run into each other in an intersection. And I think that that's where I go. It comes down to a much bigger question: is, God, I believe that you're real, and I believe that your promises, I can take them and know that you will answer and respond in accordance with your character always. And I may not like the time, I may not understand it, but if you have that as a central pillar of your activism, what you will never lack is optimism. You'll never lack hope. And and I've said this many times. I have no use for demoralization.
Mm.
Cynicism. So while I can be cynical in some of my answers with you, it doesn't affect my willingness to engage a tyrant and tell them the truth, or go out and do something. But um, when I look at the totality of of what we're up against. Yesterday being the latest iteration of, political theater. How do I not throw my hands up in exasperation? It's because I believe that God is going to save our country.
Yeah.
And I mean, when I tell you I have zero doubts, I mean, I have zero doubts, none whatsoever. I think this country matters a lot to God. And to the degree that you've got a faithful remnant that are willing to be the reckless truth tellers, he's going to reward our faith. I mean, you look at the cities in the Old Testament that he spared, just looking for just a few righteous people. I think America has millions of righteous people that really love Lord Jesus and they love our country. And I think we're going to continue to see this exposure. And I think this latest iteration of exposure on the larger discussion of conflating and misdiagnosing the love of the Israeli people with a love of a deep state intelligence group within the Israeli government is going to be brought to bear. I think Christ wants us to follow him and his ways, not the ways of Mark Levin, not the way of some hot-headed pastor that's part of Conservative Inc. And he sees the heart, he sees the mind. And I probably would be a lot less optimistic if I didn't see the number of victories that we've experienced. We've experienced real, tangible victories, and you just can't look past them. I mean, we're always looking at the corruption. It's like Trump's in. And people are being indicted. People are being arrested. And I see the playing board really emerging in a way that when it's time for God to act, he's going to act so decisively, so quickly, that it's going to be a beautiful thing to behold.
Yeah, it is going to be a beautiful thing to behold. And I think those reversals and boomerangs are going to be starting like very, very soon.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in it's coming. I felt like I heard from the Lord this morning, the time of reversal and boomerang and turnaround is here now. And I believe that's because who knows why, right? Who knows why God's timing. But I do think that yesterday's fake election has incensed so many people and has so many people just losing it and like so angry because they can't understand how this could possibly happen, especially in Trump's America. How could this happen? Now the story maybe can be told in a meaningful way where people are willing to hear it.
Well, yeah, it forces them to get away from this binary way of thinking, which is, and this was a risk of last year. Trump won, therefore election problem solved.
Right.
And it's like, no, Trump got in because there's more than meets the eye to Trump and whether or not he had assistance. And he did. There's just no way that, you're going to have, I remember the watch party. Joe Rogan talked about Elon Musk saying he won, and it was right before no one called the race. He looked at an app. Well, what was he looking at? This is the guy that owns Starlink, who basically has, satellite infrastructure dominance. And you've got Trump who, created Space Force, or at least signed it into existence.
Mm-hmm.
You can't overlook these things. And so like my critics will often suggest that I've been drinking or smoking the hopium pipe, reading too much into things. And I would say, no, I would say that it's equally absurd for people to walk past things like that, to walk past Trump saying, I was the 46th president. He's either clinically insane for saying that, or perhaps you shouldn't walk past it. A presidential rally with a chart that says that he left office on April 1st. It's like, that's the kind of typographical error if you're staff that gets you fired. You don't show up with that chart at every rally and bring attention to it. So I feel like now's the time to talk about things that I probably wouldn't have done 2 years ago, because I was always so concerned about a passive posture that we're just waiting for our saviors. But I think now is, I think you're right. I already think that the boomerangs started. When you look at Bolton and
Yeah.
Comey and Letitia James and Fannie Willis and some of the orchestrators over at Antifa and BLM, um, the boomerang's already been in effect. People have been arrested. People have been indicted, and it's only going to increase. You saw the altercation with John Brennan, um, where he's physically poking a guy in the chest that was confronting him about his manipulation of the Crossfire Hurricane hoax, and what was going on there. And he looks like a guy that knows that his days are numbered,
Wow.
because they are.
Yeah, they
So,
are.
yeah, what a time.
If you had to pick, what do you think is going to happen first? The end of the Fed or fixing the election system?
Mm. Wow. I don't know. Um, my heart's with elections as kind of the primary end goal. And so it might come down to an idea of, because it is the worst subversion of our country that I can think of, that you save that for last, and you just continue to work towards something as you expose corruption in all of its different ways. But the Fed, I see the Fed as kind of being part and parcel to the perception theater, because every rigged, corrupt infrastructure has to have a financier.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have talked about Trump presiding over bankrupting the corporation. A lot of people talked about 1871. And, one of the things that I didn't bring up in my third term video was that thesis of what happens if you restore the republic. What happens to the idea of term limits? Could Trump just enter into his first term as part of a restored republic? And I want people to know I have given it thought. I did not put that in the video explicitly, because I think that the continuity of government argument, which is in the video, really gives you the wedge to explore that. But my problem is that 99% of the population has no idea about continuity of government being a possibility. And I don't think it's a possibility. I truly believe that it was triggered. That's the only way that
Yeah.
you can explain the bizarre things that we've seen over the past 5 years. And it really does open up a series of doors where you can seriously treat Trump's action over the past 10 years as the continuation of a single term. Because if continuity of government was initiated on April 1st, 2020, what happens? When does your term end is the question that's asked. And it's really when you restore and go back to a place where you didn't have to have a shadow government in place. And I don't know, I'm confessing, I don't know the mechanism on how to end that. But in theory, that tells you that he didn't enjoy a second term. So one of the things that I talk about in that video is, okay, if part of the operation is to reverse engineer this thing that Yuri Bezmenov talked about, the 4 stages of subversion, where you moralize a nation and you create stability and you solve crises and there's accountability. If you really want to take it to its logical end and really awaken the American people, you probably need to expose that this, in fact, was the greatest psyop in history, and it would have to be. But if part of the plan is, I don't think that the American people will buy into how incredible this operation is, Then for optics, you go through the 22nd Amendment approach because it's something that we know, that we can touch, that history has had something to do with. And so in some ways, I felt like that video was really more for the normies than it was for people that I think are seeing the problem much more clearly. And I might do a follow-up video on this idea of bankrupting the corporation. But you really start getting into areas where it's truly speculative. And
Yeah.
I don't like doing that. I mean, like, it's fun for about a second, but it's like you don't want to speak on something as if you really do have the down low, and the receipts from where I stand aren't there to show that maybe Trump isn't here to deal with the abuse of our nation going back 150 years. I mean, at some point, okay, is he going to solve literally every constitutional defect that we've faced? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not saying that it's not possible, but that would be a heavy lift. And when you start talking about the Federal Reserve, before I knew about rigged elections, that really was to me the primary issue.
Yeah.
But I haven't put them on the same stage when it comes to importance. And that's coming from a person who wrote his long paper in law school. That basically my thesis was on the Federal Reserve. So I'm not ignorant about how pernicious that entity is.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to you exploring that further,
Mhm.
and especially what you're going to be bringing out this weekend with the Tucker Fuentes interview. Thank you for being so thoughtful, David, and I just appreciate you so much because you're wearing your heart on your sleeve. You're living authentically, and you are not shying away from the difficult questions. And I just look forward to seeing what other knots the Lord is going to have you wrestle with and untangle for us. So thank you very much. And remind us how to follow you and how to find your work.
Yeah, if you go to theprofessorsrecord.com, all one word, theprofessorsrecord.com, there are little social media icons. So if you're on Truth, click on the button, follow me there if you're on X. But that's the best way to figure out where I'm at across the board. But I'm asking really for people to follow me on Substack. If you had to pick one, that seems to be the place where I'm able to get out my work, and it's organized, it's there, and you have the option to get all of my work for free, to subscribe. And if you like the videos and the things that I'm putting out every week, I'm asking kind of for people to be sponsors of that because I want to make the content free for everyone. So you don't get any extra perks for being a monthly sponsor, but to the degree that people are liking these short films, really essentially is what we're making each Sunday. I can pay an editor and justify putting a ton of time into them because these are like basically I'm wearing myself ragged, writing, producing, editing, and I share editing responsibilities with one other. But I pay this person, and all of the libraries and the stuff that you use are all annual subscriptions. So I'm trying not only to not go in the hole making the videos, but
Yeah.
get to a place where this is the closest thing that I've had to employment in 5 years. Because I really don't know if I can do anything else just based on, I'm pretty much unemployable at the university level and in government, especially given my stances on mask wearing and everything else. There are people that will ask questions like, if this happens again, would you comply with the policy? And my answer to that would be hell no.
Yeah.
So it kind of puts me in a weird spot. So yeah,
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I look, your lawsuit is still ongoing. You
it
filed it.
is.
All
They
right.
they are we're in a dispositive motion phase where they're moving to dismiss the case, which is what you do from the defense
Sure.
side. So if I survive the motion to dismiss, now mind you, I'm in New Mexico, and I don't have a high opinion of whether the courts are honest, but if I live to fight another day, then great, praise. But the way that lawsuits are generally designed is all of the advantages are for the defense early on, because you can use all the procedural rules to see if you can, as I affectionately call it, shit can a case.
Hmm.
And so right now I'm kind of in this position of I just got to survive. And then if you survive them and you get to a jury trial, then I'll be sitting pretty. But that's probably a long ways away.
Okay. Well, keep us posted, and God bless you. And definitely an encouragement to everyone watching. Go to Professor's Record, subscribe, support the work. It's beautiful, and it's very thoughtful, and so well executed. So thank you again, Professor David Clements. Appreciate you, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you, Danielle. Thanks for having me. It's always wonderful talking with you. The time just flies by, and for folks that tune into this weekend's installment, I think most of what I've shared today is really what you're going to see in a 20-minute video. So it'll be a little bit more concise.
Well, thanks for working it out with us. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
You too. If you're looking to invest in physical precious metals or convert your 401k to a precious metals backed IRA, please consider making your investment with our trusted partner, MetalStacks. Their prices regularly beat the big sites, and they have no credit card fees or minimums. Shipping is free for orders over $500. Just visit metalstacks.com/dwalker or get there from our website, freedomstate.us. If you're interested in the IRA conversion, drop me a message at danielle@freedomstate.us and I can get you connected with their white glove service. Meet the world's first living, full-spectrum, certified organic CBDA hemp extract. Ness's hemp oil was extracted from seed to bottle without chemicals, solvents, or heavy metals, and it surpasses world-class standards for purity. This pure and powerful CBDA has been proven to reduce aches and pains, ease mental tension, and promote better sleep. To get yours today, visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. Thanks for joining me today on For the Love of Freedom. It is an honor and a true privilege to get to spend some time with you. If you're looking for other episodes of this show, you can find them on all of the State of Freedom platforms. And a reminder that this show is live on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Central. God bless.